Same old game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for November 18th, 2024, and I'm J.D. Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this conversation. Fair warning, things are about to get real emotional around here. Real
What
passionate.
else is new? What else is new?
I have been a huge champion for animated film this year. And spoiler alert, that is not about to change. I think it has been one of the best years for animation in some time. I would even go as far as back as 2014, and I don't know.
Say
if
maybe in
there'll
a
be-
decade. Yeah, an exact decade ago was probably the best year for animation ever.
Exactly. I was just about to say I don't know if there will ever be another year, at least as far as how releases, like the timing of releases in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't know if there will ever be another year better than 2014,
Mm-hmm,
but I do think this comes the closest. I think we're about to experience something special. There is one more on my radar that I am really curious about.
Yeah.
The animated film Flow.
I was gonna say
I have not
Flow,
seen.
right? Yeah. I finally saw a trailer for that one.
Same.
I was keeping myself a bit of a distance with that. Only because I heard good things and I wanted to go into it fresh. And I forget what movie I went to go see. It may have been Anora. They played a trailer for Flow before that, and I was very mystified by what I saw. It made me really intrigued by it.
I was deeply intrigued as well. Has Wall-E written all over it in a way? And
But the
I'm
animation
excited.
style, it looks like a video game cutscene, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. It looks like something that I haven't seen as an animated feature film before.
Yeah.
It looks different.
I am curious. The reviews are really good. Really, really good. So I do hope that I respond to it. I hope that I'm able to walk away as high as most people seem to be with that film. And if so, it will solidify 2024 as the best year for animation in a decade. There's no doubt about it.
That's also not counting if Moana 2 is a surprise hit.
And that could be a surprise film as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is one more for those counting and keeping track. I am aware there's the Lord of the Rings movie coming out in December.
Yeah.
I have seen it. Under embargo. I literally cannot say a thing about it.
Okay.
Other than I've seen it.
Okay.
So I cannot even tease it. I can't
Good
do
for you.
anything.
Good for
All I
you.
can
We'll
say is
stop
I've
there.
seen it.
We'll stop there.
We'll stop there. Yeah, we'll talk about it as it comes.
We will give that a feature review when it comes out.
We will give it a review. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Right now, though, we're here to talk about Adam Elliott's new film, Memoir of a Snail. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the film's plot here, which honestly I cannot wait to get into, at least to some degree. Brendan and I don't really talk about plot in these conversations.
No.
However, I do want to briefly talk about at least some of it here because it is loosely inspired by Adam's own life. And I want to know to what degree, because if this follows his story, I need to give this man a hug. Someone hug this man, because my God. Okay.
I want to know how many of the specifics here are drawn from real life experience, because there are certain things that are depicted in this movie that are, I don't want to say that they are so far-fetched that they're unbelievable, because they're not, but they're also incredibly odd and quirky that I just need to know how true it all is.
I need to know. Now, it is loosely inspired. We don't know what that means, but let's just say for the sake of argument that the details are different, but the bullet points themselves are true. Adam, if you ever make your way to South Florida, let me know. You will have endless beers on me. okay?
Yeah.
Because someone needs to take care of you. My goodness.
It might be like a big fish kind of scenario where the actual bullet points themselves are vaguely true, but maybe there's an embellishment on the storytelling aspect of it. I feel like that's mostly the case. Even if that is the case when it comes to Memoir of a Snail, yeah, Adam Elliot still deserves a hug.
He does. And he very much does.
When you compare this to Mary and Max, yeah, he's definitely drawing from similar thematic ideas.
Yes.
So, yeah.
For sure. And that is ultimately the second point that I was going to bring up is that Brendan is a huge champion for Mary and Max.
Yeah.
As one of the best films to come out in 2009. I believe that film came out.
Yep,
if I
that's
remember
true.
correctly. So this is a film that we've been looking forward to. I actually did not catch up with Mary and Max until, I don't know, about a week. I think it was the week leading up to Memoir of a Snail because it was on my list to see at the Miami Film Festival a few weeks ago. And I had not seen Mary and Max, so I caught up with it that week.
Yep.
Got mad at Brendan because, my goodness, that is a bleak movie.
Okay, let me speak to that for just a second because it must have been about a month ago when you finally caught up with that in preparation for Memoir of a Snail. And I knew you were about to watch it ahead of time. And I just get a text from you, no context, that says, well, that was bleak. And, like, no context of what it related to. And I knew right away, oh, you finally saw Mary and Max, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, goodness gracious. But it did set the table very well. It was a great appetizer because, again, for reasons we'll get into, Memoir of a Snail, also dour. quite so. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. Memoir of a Snail is, of course, written and directed by Adam Elliot. It stars Sarah Snook, Cody Smith-McPhee, Eric Bana, and a bunch of others that come and go throughout the film.
Oh, cannot forget Jackie Weaver. Pinky.
Oh, Jackie
herself.
Weaver. Yes, Jackie Weaver. Yes.
Pinky. Oh, she should run for president.
To include Miss Jackie Weaver, who we do love.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with Memoir of a Snail, it is a bittersweet memoir of a melancholic woman called Grace, a hoarder of snails, romance novels, and guinea pigs, and ashes. Cannot forget the ashes.
Those are pretty important. Those are pretty important. Yeah.
All right, Brendan, let's fight. What did you think about Memoir of a Snail?
It's funny, we're going to fight when the disparity is probably not really that big. We have to find reasons to fight just because we never disagree on anything. I think the only disagreement that we're going to have on Memoir of a Snail is I definitely prefer Mary and Max over Memoir of a Snail. I don't think it's quite as good as that prior film, but I also admit when I watched Memoir of a Snail, I might not have been in the right headspace given the bleakness of this one, which is very overt, in a similar way to Mary and Max, but I think I've had enough time to sit on that film to really recognize what it is. And maybe I just need more time to really sit with Memoir of a Snail. If anything, my rating of it or whatever grade I choose to give it will only go up from here.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm willing to acknowledge that there's one particular thing about the film I'm still wrestling with, and we'll talk about that later because I think there are more important things here relating to its themes, its drama, basically how it's functioning as an emotional animated experience. I think that's more worth talking about. And there, I think we're going to find a lot of synergy. You're right that this film does go in places that it almost makes a movie like Hereditary look like Dora the Explorer by comparison. Which may sound snarky, but I think Adam Elliot handles these heavy themes with elegance, with grace, no pun intended, given the lead character's name.
Very pun intended.
Yeah. There's a lot of quirky humor here, much like Mary and Max as well. I think the film is just as sad as it is hilarious, and I think that's where it succeeds. It's in its depiction of those people who have been outcasted as a result of their uncontrollable misfortunes. In the case of Mary and Max, it was its depiction of mental health. specifically about Asperger's syndrome, whereas Memoir of a Snail is very much diving headfirst into those ideas of grief and trauma and addiction and how that can manifest itself into one person. Really made me sympathetic of those stories you hear of hoarders that just live in their collectibles, whatever they've been collecting over the years. And this movie psychologically gets into a reason for that. So I do think it is a very moving experience. And as far as animated films of the year, I mean, this is a very good year for animation. Wrong. I would say right now this is second to The Wild Robot for me. But I think both are. I wouldn't be surprised if they both end up being my top 2 favorite animated films of the year when it's all said and done. I do think they're both very good. I think this one is also very good. I may like it more as I compartmentalize certain things that it's doing, but I do think it overall really works.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that at this point, ever so slightly, I do prefer The Wild Robot, but my goodness, I absolutely love this film. It
good.
Slayed me. Absolutely put me into the ground. This is one of the most beautiful films I've seen this year. It's also one of the most achingly melancholic, as you might expect with Adam Elliot. It is quite bleak, but underneath its sorrow is an emotionally intelligent portrait of loneliness and family and grief, as you're talking about, and also the importance of moving forward, giving the film a symbolic richness that perhaps we can talk about as we go with its depiction of snails. To emphasize this further, Elliot goes full tilt in the first act of this film. The first 20 minutes are, and I cannot emphasize this enough, immensely depressing. It begins with Grace's best friend. This is in the opening scene, not a spoiler. Yeah. It begins with Grace's friend Pinky passing away. So even though at this point in the movie, because it is the opening frame of it, we don't know these characters yet, and the film immediately establishes its pathos. Immediately. And then soon we find out that Grace's mom, as we flash back to Grace's childhood, we find out that her mom died during childbirth. Her dad was a paraplegic who couldn't really take care of them properly. And that brought on some hard challenges. And eventually he succumbed to his illness, which then led to child services getting involved, splitting up her and her twin brother, Gilbert, who she was very, very close to. Even noting as he drives away there in the bus, that was the last time that she would ever see him. All of that is the setup to this film. It is just the setup. Are you kidding me? Someone give this man a hug. It is utterly devastating.
That is assuming Adam Elliot is a cipher for Grace herself.
Assuming it is tragic with a capital T. It is so devastating, the opening act of this
and you're not
film.
Even alluding to where the film goes in its second and even third act. There's a relationship of sorts that Grace forms with, let's just say, a romantic partner.
Oh, it gets worse. Yeah, it definitely gets worse.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
no,
goodness.
I completely agree.
And that revelation made my jaw hit the floor.
For sure. And we can get to that as we go here. But I at least wanted to note that as the film begins and just setting up the emotional melancholy of these characters, it is Grace never getting to know her mom. Her dad couldn't really take care of them, even though she clearly had some sort of connection to him. There's some really great endearing moments when she's talking about her father, the broken vases and the sentimentality that went along with that. The roller coaster moment. Oh my goodness. Absolutely incredible. Even the interactions with her brother Gilbert, the fun they had, the fire, how that comes about. There's so much about that opening 20 minutes that is so endearing and devastating with how it is tragedy after tragedy after tragedy for Grace. But the film doesn't linger in that deep melancholy the whole time. Once we move beyond that opening act, Elliot does wonderfully, I think, swing the tone to some great levity and unexpected surprises. For example, Grace, who we noted the child services split up her and her brother.
Yeah.
Grace is sent to a pair of swingers. Yep, you heard me right. She is sent to a pair of swingers. This is a film that
weird.
This has to be a record for nudity in stop motion animation. There is a lot of it. There is a lot of nudity here.
There is a lot. Oh my goodness.
Like that whole sequence is wild. It is absolutely wild. Even some of the imagery there with Gilbert and his family and the nutcases they are.
This is probably the most frontal nudity we've seen in a stop motion animated film, and just in animation in general. Probably the most frightening depiction of religious fanaticism that I think we've ever seen in an animated film as well.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And then you get to the Pinky stuff later on that I think is really quite diverting as well. I'm sure we'll talk more about it. And in terms of surprises, you get to the final 5 minutes of this film that absolutely floored me emotionally. And honestly, I think even in terms of surprise, it did kind of get me a little bit because we're not talking about Pixar. We're not talking about Disney. Adam Elliot has more than enough in terms of who he is as a filmmaker with Mary Max, and then even everything in this film leading up to that final 5 minutes. There's nothing about Mary and Max. There's nothing about the first 90 minutes of this film that would suggest that this is the rug he's going to pull in the final 5 minutes. Like
that's fair.
I think that's why I didn't see it coming. I do love that about this film. I do love how he's able to kind of toy with your emotions in that regard. So as melancholic as it is, there are these great unexpected surprises. There is unexpectedly some great laughs to be had, and how he rides that line here, the tonal management of this film is breathtaking. It is a magic trick that he somehow pulls off. And then you couple in the performances, Sarah Snook, unreal. She is really,
it's a very good vocal performance. Yeah, I agree with you.
Really love her in this film. But all of Cody Smith-McPhee is really good. Jackie Weaver is fantastic. They're all.
I love Pinky.
Really,
I love
really
Pinky.
No, Pinky's fantastic. Yeah. I do agree. The animation here, this is a really beautifully rendered film for as dark as it does get in its narrative and emotion. There is a beauty to it that I found astonishing. I fell for the spell of this film. It is really great. And the last thing I'll say, as far as my opening notes is concerned, I think a big part of that spell, I love the performances, I love Elliot, and the animation here. The music by Alina Katz-Chernin, phenomenal. One of
really
the
good.
best scores of the year as well. I could not get enough. I have not stopped listening to it since I first saw this. Incredible, terrific music.
The movie is really well scored. The music is great, and it's so great it made me not feel sadness or like I was missing something. The fact that it wasn't composed by someone like Nick Cave, who does have a vocal appearance and cameo in this movie, which I feel like is, I guess, part of his contract now. Anytime a movie from Australia is made, Nick Cave maybe needs to have a part in it. He plays a character named Bill, who I guess is one of Pinky's prior husbands, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And the second he opened his mouth, he has maybe only one or two lines of dialogue. I thought that voice sounds so familiar, and it's so easy to pick out his voice because if you ever listen to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, he does a lot of spoken word pieces. He doesn't always sing in a traditional way. In fact, his vocal styling is very much like, it's almost like he's praying as opposed to singing. So it's very easy to pick out his voice. And I guess it's like, I guess it's part of his contract now. He's got to appear in every Australian movie ever made. But it was nice to hear his voice. Yeah. I do have thoughts on that ending. I'll save that for later, which, full transparency, that's not the thing about the movie I'm wrestling with. I actually think there are really interesting things about that ending that we could talk about later. I do want to agree with you further about the film's tonal management, which I think is perhaps one of the best things about it. And it was also one of the best things about Mary and Max as well. It's something I really loved about that movie is given the devastating places it goes, both of these movies from Adam Elliot are really, really weird and really funny. And it treats its seriousness in a way that's so absurd and odd that you sometimes can't help but laugh, but also feel that sense of melancholy simultaneously. It's not like one of those cases where it's really easy to have individualized scenes that are very quirky and funny, only to then have other scenes that counteract that, which are then designed to move you, right? We see many movies that do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to have it happen simultaneously within a single exchange is really the most difficult task here. And I do think that Adam Elliot does a great job straddling that line. So I alluded to this earlier, when we get that revelation of Grace's, we'll say her marriage, there's a revelation about her marriage at one point nearing the third act. It is one of the oddest things I've seen all year, and it's also one of the saddest things. I didn't know how to respond to it, and that's what I loved about it. It's willing to have both of those things happen simultaneously.
I agree. That was one of those unexpected surprises as well. And it is interesting how the film gets to have its cake and eat it too in that regard, because the way Grace and Ken meet, there is an endearing quality to it. There is charm. There's fun to be had, especially with Pinky, who is a part of it there as well.
Yeah.
And we're contrasting that to the constant upheaval that Gilbert is experiencing at the hands of this family. As you noted, is, they're these religious fanatics, and he's constantly at war with them. And Ken and getting married is something that does two things for Grace. One, it does solidify her life in a way that brings her this pleasure that she had never really experienced before. We noted earlier in our opening thoughts that there is this aura of loneliness that, wafts over the film. There are a lot of scenes here where Grace talks about how she doesn't really have any friends. We've noted already that her family has already tragically passed away, or she's been separated from Gilbert. The only way they can communicate is by writing letters to each other. So similarly to Mary and Max, there's a lot of voiceover here as Grace and Gilbert communicate with each other, which then, of course, the animation tethers to and manifesting that narration. And because of the loneliness that she's constantly experiencing, and she feels like her life is going nowhere. She's never had a boyfriend. She's never experienced sex to any sort of degree. Again, something this film actually brings up, like an animated film brings that up.
It's a very adult film. It's not necessarily a sexy film, but it has a lot of sex related themes in it.
Absolutely, 100%. So then she meets Ken, and it does give her life a fulfillment that she had never experienced before. So that is one element of it. But maybe even more so, what it does is that it gives her hope that she's going to get to see Gilbert again.
Yeah.
And how that begins to build on itself, I do think is really great. Now, I don't want to get into details as to what happens there with Ken and Gilbert's involvement in it all.
That needs to be left a surprise.
I'll avoid that. Absolutely, it needs to be left a surprise. But again, circling back to the tone management of it, how the film builds around, again, those notions of grief and loneliness, how that has crystallized for Grace, how it brings her hope, an interesting duality in this film. And then there's the big reveal. And again, without getting into too many spoilers, but again, it's just this constant swinging of emotion and constant swinging of tone that really should not work. I feel like it should be jarring, and maybe in a lot of ways it is, but you don't really sense this constant flow of melancholy and hope. Like it does kind of waft, it just kind of lingers there, and it does swing back and forth, but it feels so of a piece with everything else.
It's always aware of those things. That's the thing. Yeah.
It is very aware, and I think the performances are really great into helping navigate those tonal waters as well. The score, certainly a big part of it.
Yeah.
But I never found that at a disservice to the film. Like it just really is incredible how it feels full and magical and authentic without ever, feeling tonally messy or disjointed.
No, I'd say maybe the only moment, or really the only character that maybe veers a little bit away from that tonal melancholy and more into something a bit more overtly comedic is when Pinky is on screen. But I think it's the right time for that, especially when we hear her backstory about her previous two husbands. I mentioned the one voiced by Nick Cave already, but the insertion of a word like "bugger" after each one, I think, is really well timed. And like I said, it's really the only moment that seems to be very deliberately trying to shift away from that melancholic awareness, I guess you can say. But like I said, I think it's the right moment and the right character to do that with, because I think as a whole, it helps counterbalance the movie in totality. So then it doesn't lean too far on one spectrum. That's the thing. It's like Adam Elliot makes these movies, this one and Mary and Max specifically, as his two feature films. It's almost like he has this scale in front of him that are designed to measure both extremes, and he's always mathematically trying to balance it every step of the way. It's so precise, and I think Mary and Max was just as effective in balancing those tones as well, and still offer that same kind of quirkiness too. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it definitely handles that very well.
Yeah, another aspect of this film that I find incredible, and it's something that tethers to something that we've talked a lot about here over the years here on the show. And it's this idea of the biopic. Now, this obviously isn't a traditional biopic. We have talked about how this is loosely based off of Adam's.
So it's a loose autobiography of sorts.
A loose autobiography. And the reason I bring that up is because so often we criticize biopics when it is emphasizing a larger story, when it is the bullet point of someone's life, that it feels very Wikipedia. Those narratives tend to be quite dull and lacking in density. I think what's incredible about this film, again, with how it is this magic trick, it is in a lot of ways inserting that formula. And it works here. It works, and it is thematically pivotal to this film because we do chart so much of Grace's life going back to her childhood and the tragedy of it, as we noted earlier. And then we get into her as a young adult, again, the loneliness and the lack of any sort of social life. She doesn't have a brother, all of that stuff that we've mentioned earlier, and then insert Ken. I think by having all of those things here, Elliot is able to explore, I think quite poignantly, the insecurity that Grace feels. We see how she's bullied in those earlier scenes, or really throughout a lot of this film, really.
Oh yeah, these bullies are very violent.
Very, very violent. There's everything with Ken. There's everything with Pinky. At every turn, she's experiencing these devastating hardships. And I think that is the success of this film in a lot of ways, because how she responds to that tragedy, how that comes through in the voiceover. That's why I wanted to emphasize Sarah Snook's performance, because there is this, and I'll use your word, I'll use the pun, there is a gracefulness to how she responds to this tragedy that you just can't help but fall in love with. It is so arresting, the empathy and the hopefulness that she embodies. Otherwise, like most of us wouldn't choose what she chooses here. I think that was really great. Yeah. And how that ties back to the larger theme of this film, because I think what this is about more than anything else is this idea of moving forward. We can't move backwards. We can only move forward. That is ultimately the thematic nucleus of this film.
It's the tagline for the movie.
It's the tagline of the movie. That's why it uses snails, because snails, obviously, they very literally, physically, they cannot move backwards. They can only move forward.
Yeah, and they never cover their tracks once again. And there's a whole notion of like the symbolic gesture of snails coming out of their shells. Like there's a lot like you could draw from that as well too.
Absolutely. So I think there is a thematic denseness to this film, and how it utilizes that idea of moving forward, but in a way where we can also use memory and love of those we've lost. Like that does influence her perspective. And Grace, it influences her perspective. So there's an element of cherishing your past, cherishing loved ones. And that's why I kind of love the sentimentality of Grace, right? She has her dad's ashes. Yeah. She has all of these things from her childhood that remind her of her parents and of her brother. But ultimately, those things aren't there to hold her back, not to hold her in the past, but rather it does become, ironically, a thing that helps her move forward in her life. And so she's constantly moving on from one thing to the next. And that idea inside of grief and tragedy, I do think is quite poignant in how the film manifests those ideas. I don't think it's ever saccharine or overly sentimental. There is a lot of emotion to this film, but it is all grounded.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, it absolutely. For all of the chaos of this film, it is grounded in a way that I think all of us can, that we can understand and and probably relate with in a significant way.
It is a movie all about movement, right? Whether that be thematically, like you're talking about, even in the film's overall sense of pace, it's a movie that really moves. It's for a movie with the word snail in its title, it does not move at a snail's pace at all. That is definitely worth noting. And I do agree with a lot of what you're saying as far as how the film utilizes that structure to maintain that emotional core. And it never does feel overwhelming. It also might tie into the thing I am still wrestling with regarding this movie. And I'm not even really sure what it is. I did pinpoint it on my Letterboxd review what I think it might be, but I'm actually second guessing myself a little bit.
Okay.
Well, because and the reason why I'm second guessing myself is because this movie does employ a very similar narrative technique as Mary and Max. They're very similar in that regard.
Yeah.
I don't always love the idea of voiceover narration, but unless it's utilized well. I love the way it's utilized in Mary and Max because it's mostly from an innocent observer. And then when there is voiceover from the two characters of Mary and Max themselves, it's actually governed by the plot, the letters that they write towards each other. So it makes sense there. And I do think Grace's voiceover here also makes sense because I get that in her moment, or in this particular moment after Pinky's passing, that opens up the movie, she would feel the need to want to start opening up about her life story to one of her own snails. I get that motivation. I think that makes sense. Maybe it's a pacing thing. The fact that the movie does move so briskly. This entire movie feels like a first act montage to me. And by the time we actually get to the end, I thought, oh, we're only 20 minutes in. And so, wait, the movie's over? It felt like a short film. And maybe that's, I guess, a praise I can give the movie for not following the form of what you would expect a movie to do. And I guess I can respect that. It got to a point that I guess, given that energy, I started to feel like the movie was being more recited to me as opposed to showing me, if that makes sense. I guess maybe it's the energy of it, and that's where I'm wrestling with it. I'm not quite sure if I've been able to, I guess, compartmentalize those things. I think I'll like it more on a rewatch. I might not have just been ready for that energy that the film has, and that might be the thing for me that I'm still wrestling with.
Okay, I mean, I certainly did not have that experience. I felt the same synergy between its visuals and voiceover structure as I did with Mary and Max. So if I had to criticize this film in that way, I would have to criticize Mary and Max for doing the same thing. I felt
that's why I'm being
very similar.
That's why I'm being careful with how I say that, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm criticizing one movie for doing the same thing that I loved about another movie, right?
For sure.
I think there is a difference in the execution in a way, and maybe that's the thing that's maybe I'm not quite sure about yet. Needless to say, I think there was something about that energy that did at times put me at a little bit of an arm's length, even despite recognizing the realness of the film's emotional core and the sincerity of it and the lack of cheapness, like we're talking about, which I did love about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Totally fair. I, again, did not have that experience, so I don't quite share that same criticism. I do feel like there is a seamless and a great synergy between the animation and the voiceover narration, which starts off as Grace talking about her life to one of her snails. And that is mostly the structure here. There are times where it shifts to the letters that Grace and Gilbert are writing to each other, similarly to Mary and Max. So that is a big part of it as well. But I do think as the film moves from its opening, the tragedies there, and not just what happens to Grace, but how it impacts her, I think is such a big part of it. And maybe that's where I do feel the depths of this film. Like I do think there is an emotional and thematic density to it, because I think inside of that animation, there is an emphasis on how these characters respond to what's in front of them. And
there absolutely is. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. And so I do love how this film uses voiceover in a way that in most other movies, I do agree that on the whole, voiceover can be tricky with how it's implemented. There are very few filmmakers that can do it really well. Terrence Malick is certainly one that I tend to love. I
don't know if I count his movies as voiceover. That's it's so unique in how he does it. It's almost wrong to call it voiceover narration.
Yeah,
it's its own separate thing.
And that's very fair. If we are going to call it voiceover, then he certainly is the king of it.
Yeah.
But maybe in a similar way, I think Adam Elliot has kind of tapped into a way to utilize voiceover in a unique way. Even if Mary and Max, Memoir of a Snail, they're two films that maybe use it in a similar way, but it is, I think quite different from the traditional use of voiceover.
It is.
And it manifests these characters' emotions in a way that I think is really great. That couples with the visuals that we do get. I mean, sometimes the visuals are just of her apartment, the hoarding that you're talking about, the loneliness that she conveys, where the character isn't really doing much of the talking. It is that inner monologue kind of enhancing the visual that is there. And there is something about the visuals here that I do think are really gorgeous and beautiful. And, that makes, something so arresting out of, a series of events that really is anything but that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what Grace experiences here is something that you pray that everyone avoids.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's the worst possible scenario. And just when you think it hasn't gotten worse or it can't get any worse, it kind of does.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I love about Grace as a character as well, because, and this kind of circles back to Mary and Max as well, but like Grace isn't, like, there's nothing spectacular about her. And I don't say that as a bad thing.
No, she's normal.
She's very normal.
Regular person.
A regular person. And yet all of these extraordinary things happen to her in terms of grief and tragedy. And so there is something about that grounded approach that maybe gives that emotion maybe a little bit of a more vivid quality, you know, and especially when you couple it to the color palette here, the animation, and how unique it is. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to articulate, I guess, but I do think there is a great marriage between that voiceover, how it's used, the imagery here. I find it so expressive and, you know, emotionally enthralling.
Yeah, and where I was talking about maybe the film's energy and its pace and maybe how that could potentially be tied to the voiceover narration here and how that's something I'm still wrestling with, it's still better than most other egregious examples that we've heard in the past.
Sure.
I will say, even though this is not the same type of voiceover you hear in a Terrence Malick film, both Malick and Elliot do similar things as far as avoiding the pitfalls and contrivances of voiceover narration. Because with Adam Elliot, he at least has a very unique animated quality and a very unique vision and an eye for certain things that can tether to the voiceover. And he's able to structure in a way that, even if I'm not sure if I love the execution and utilization of it here as I did Mary and Max, I at least felt like, okay, the choice to have it here, the reason to have it here, doesn't feel like an unwarranted contrivance. I believe that this is something Grace felt the need to get off her chest at that moment and to that particular subject, that snail of hers, like that,
which carries a symbolic richness here, given its central themes.
In any other movie, in the hands of any lesser filmmaker, that voiceover and the choice to do it in a certain way would just feel incredibly frustrating. It would just feel like it's trying to handhold you throughout every step of the way. And I wouldn't say this is doing that. It's maybe more so the execution is still wrestling with a little bit.
I did not find it contrived, and again, I thought it was really well paced. I didn't find it overly stimulating. I was completely with the film, and maybe that's where the tone management also kind of helps, because we do get a fair amount of voiceover. There's a lot of story in maybe a short amount of time, but I don't feel like it's lacking in depth. I think this is actually one of the more dense films I've seen this year, and it's 90 minutes, 100 minutes, something along those lines.
It's like 90 minutes. Yeah, with end credits, it's probably less than 90. More of
90
this,
minutes,
please.
And I think there's all kinds of nuance and texture to this film, emotionally, thematically, dramatically. I think there's a lot of great irony here. There's a lot of great humor here. These characters are fully realized. Like there is a lush, rich, full story to be had here, all within 90 minutes. And it is one of the most emotionally enveloping, and not just because of the opening act, as we talked about earlier, but I think, again, the full story, the almost, the large biopic formula that we often criticize, that I think is a huge positive to this film. And I think there is a richness to it. So, despite it being just 90 minutes and there's a lot that happens, I don't think it is disjointed in its pacing at all. And again, I love the marriage of the voiceover and the animation. I mean, there's a lot of examples you could bring up. One that just comes to mind is, again, the way that kind of opening act ends, where we see Gilbert in the bus and he's leaving, and you just get that voiceover that says, "And that's the last time I ever saw him." Like like that, it is a poignant line on the page, but more than that, it is how Sarah Snook says that line. Like she gives that line of dialogue just this overwhelming sorrow that is incredible. Like she just gives such credence to that line that Grace is heartbroken that that's how her life played out. and you couple it with that that image, and it is arresting. It's just so good. I mean, that's one moment, but that's how like every scene kind of plays out that way.
We've been kind of joking how the year 2024 is kind of the year of unplanned double features when it comes to movies. We just got done talking about A Real Pain this week as well. And here we have two movies that deal with real pain and grief in under 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I guess
pretty incredible. Yeah.
More of this, please. And these are two of two of the most, I guess, dense films dealing with that subject matter of the year. Now, not every film, not many films are dealing with that kind of subject matter, but if you maybe look at it in the highest of levels, the broadest of ways, you can probably pull similar themes from a lot of movies that at least deal with some form of grief. And here are two movies that, minus end credits, probably get it done in 80-ish minutes and have more to say and more for you to think about afterwards. And that's why I jokingly said more of this, please, but I also say it not jokingly. More of this, please. Seriously.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, I love this film. I love what it's saying about grief and loneliness, and especially, like, that idea of moving forward. And yeah, I mean, if Grace of all people is the one saying these things, I feel like the rest of us just have no excuse.
There's hope in the world.
Like, most of us will never experience the depths of tragedy that she's experienced. And here she is in all of her glory saying, we have to keep moving forward. We can't keep staying stuck. No, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, I love that.
Yeah. I do have one thought around that. Maybe this could be my final thought on the movie. And it does involve that final reveal that we sort of danced around earlier, which we obviously won't give away. You mentioned how you didn't see it coming. I didn't, to an extent, but I also wasn't really like that blown away by when it does happen, because I felt like there are tonal choices the movie makes that kind of justify that choice that Adam Elliot makes. And that's not a bad thing. I think the breadcrumbs were there.
Oh, I think it's a necessary ending, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Well, I agree. But what I'm getting at is, while we say that there's this sense of hope and optimism there, I think there's a possible reading that the ending's not real.
Oh, I agree. No, I think that it absolutely lives there. Yeah.
Okay. I think that room is there for you to decipher it in maybe a more cynical way. We've talked about many movies that kind of end in two different ways simultaneously, depending on what your state of mind is at the moment of watching it. If you're in a more cynical mindset, you might see it as more of a tragedy. If you're looking for hope and optimism, you might see it in a completely different way. And I think this is a movie that has both avenues, depending on where you're at.
No, I completely agree. Agree. And honestly, it was one of my initial thoughts after watching this movie, but there's so much tragedy that happens here for Grace that you can't help but want to choose hope and optimism for her. Like, she deserves it more than anyone else. This person deserves happiness. Okay. Where's Adam? I need to give him a hug. Like, this person deserves happiness. Okay.
Yeah, we should be interviewing him on this show.
I know. I wish I could, because that's how I chose to interpret that moment, because there's so much that is dour about this film that to give us even just one leaflet of hope, you have to grasp onto it. But I absolutely do agree that lives there.
Yeah.
That a lot of what takes place there is not real. Maybe it isn't real. Maybe it's likely that it's not real. I don't know, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway.
Well, sometimes the choice to believe is just as powerful, right?
Yeah. But that's kind of what this is anyway. Like, that's kind of the point of that ending anyway.
It's about giving you the choice to make that belief if you want.
Yeah. And that just enhances that idea even further, that whole idea of moving on. And if you are correct that that's how it is for Grace, the idea that she chooses the snail way forward is all the more powerful.
Yeah.
Because there would be no reason for her to move forward.
Yeah.
If anyone ever had an out, she had one.
Yeah.
And to move forward anyway, despite
maybe
what happens,
maybe the realism of it or the fabrication of it, like the fact that she's choosing to move forward in any way, even despite maybe manifesting something to give her that push to move forward, it's still a choice to move forward.
But that's what I mean. Like, that's what makes it more powerful. The fact that she would have to manifest this because that's just another notch on the belt, and not just another notch, one of the biggest notches.
Yeah.
If not the biggest notches.
It's the only way to end this movie, I think. I do think Adam Elliot sticks the landing.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Now, do I, again, I'm choosing to believe hope instead of the notch.
Oh, I mean, I am too. I mean, at this point now.
You're not wrong, though.
Yeah, but at this point now, it's like if I were to go back and rewatch A Matter of Life and Death, the Powell and Pressburger film, I still latch onto those themes of love saving the world, right?
Okay.
I'm not quite in the headspace. I know, yeah, you're a bit more cynical when it comes to that movie. But I do openly acknowledge that cynical viewpoint is there, and that makes me love the movie even more. And the case with Memoir of a Snail, I'm at a point now where, I mean, at least I'm at a particular point in my life where I'm looking more on the optimistic side of that possibility that it ends on.
Yeah.
Now that could change depending on maybe if I rewatch this 3 or 4 years from now and I'm in a different zone for whatever reason, I might look at it differently. But I like that the movie has that room. It's not a singular experience.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a brilliant way to end this movie because simply as a dramatic exercise, you're like, oh, you feel relief for Grace.
Yeah.
But thematically, emotionally, the manifestation, I do think, is more powerful. Like, that is a more powerful interpretation, given what the film's themes are and its symbolism. And for Grace to choose that, it is astonishing.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it powerful, is it's something that a lot of people wouldn't choose.
Right.
And, you know, no one would blame them for not choosing it. But that's what makes the film and its nucleus, incredible. That's what makes it great. Memoir of a Snail. Awesome movie. Awesome movie. I love it.
Yeah. Not sure if I liked it more during this conversation, but I will say it is the one movie from this year I am most wanting to give another watch because I think I need to be in the right headspace for some of those things I'm still wrestling with. So my rating may only go up from here.
All right. Yeah.
Maybe if I give it a rewatch, I might come back to you and say, "Oh, this is way better than The Wild Robot." I might.
Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised knowing how much you loved Mary and Max.
Yeah, and that was kind of a grower for me. Mary and Max was not an immediate one for me. I had to really sit with that one for a bit, and this is probably another example.
And this might, because there is a lot here. It is a dense movie, for better or worse, and I can understand why it might be overwhelming for some people, but I think it rides that line impeccably throughout the entire film, and I certainly did not feel the pacing that you were talking about earlier.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like, it felt really full to me, really full and dense.
Okay.
Genuinely one of the more dense movies I feel like I've seen this year.
I think that I can agree with.
So, at any rate,
Adam Elliot, good at his job.
Really good. Sarah Snook, fantastic. The score to this film, I also want to say again, one of the best scores of the year.
Yeah.
If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can email us incessionfilm@gmail.com. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you. We have 2 other reviews out this week. Brendan noted we have a review out for A Real Pain. We also talked about Jacques Audiard's Emilia Perez, excuse me.
Yeah.
And episode 611 is available for you to go and check out as well. We talked about our favorite musicals of the 21st century so far. We will have very soon a new Chasing the Gold. We'll have a new Women in Session out this week. A lot happening. Award season. It is underway.
It is busy.
Yeah, it's great. As far as animation goes this year, I guess my last final note here. The Wild Robot is still my favorite of the year. That's currently in my top 10 at the moment. I'm that high on it. Memoir of a Snail, though, is my number 2. A high number 2 for me as far as animation goes.
We have the same top 2.
Have the same top 2. Then there is Transformers 1. I'm still quite high on Transformers 1. I think that is one of the best surprises of the year.
I enjoyed that film quite a bit. You liked Inside Out 2 more than I did, but I didn't dislike it. I did like it overall, and we can't ignore the record-shattering numbers that it had. So that really does lead to the narrative of it being an important year for animation, nonetheless.
Yeah, and Inside Out 2 at this point would be my number 4, and that's another film to what you said about this film, Memoir of a Snail, and rewatching it. Now, I liked Inside Out 2 a lot on my first viewing. I ended up giving that one another watch because my wife wanted to see it. So we sat down. She watched it for the first time. I give it my second watch of the year. And that film is decidedly in my 5. I think it is quite easily to this point. Now there's still one more animated film, 2 more animated films I have to see. Moana 2 would have to blow me the F away to remove Inside Out 2 from my 5.
I think I heard the review embargo is not lifting until like the night before it releases, so that might not be a good sign.
Yeah, probably not a good sign. But yeah, on my rewatch of Inside Out 2, I came away from that film loving it even more. Like I deeply respond to the way that film, and obviously I love the first film. It is my favorite Pixar film, one of my favorite animated films of all time. I don't like Inside Out 2 isn't the best animated film of the year, but I think it is handily in the 5. To this point. I'm assuming Flow will be the other one in there. Now where that ranks, I don't know. It could be 5, it could be 1. I really don't know, but I'm assuming that it's going to make it into the 5 there. But Inside Out 2, even if it's 5th on that list, that is not, well, I need a 5th and I like this one. No, I think it is handily in the 5.
Okay.
I think it is more than a well-deserved. I think it deserves to be talked about among the rest of these.
Okay.
Yeah, I really love it. Really
well,
love it a lot.
I guess when we're talking about best animated films of the year, do we also include The Remarkable Life of Evelyn?
Well, see, now that would change things a little bit. Yeah. I don't know. Like I guess at this point I'm thinking, like in my mind I think about that more as a documentary. And there is a lot of live action to that film. So like I don't know where you place it. There's a lot of animation, but there's also a lot. Yeah, it's not half live animation or half live action.
It's not like Piece by Piece, which is very much an animated film, just as much as a documentary. There's a lot of animation in Evelyn though, and it at times feels like its own animated movie with its own narrative. So I don't know, like that's kind of a question mark.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, at this point, and we'll talk about it more, I guess, and I'm sure there will be discussion as award season goes on. I am considering that more documentary than animated film, but I do think Inside Out 2 deserves to be in the 5. The last thing I'll say on it though, I really do hope desperately that Inside Out 2 just remains one of those movies that's nominated and doesn't win any of the awards.
Oh, because it's going to be insufferable when it does.
Because it's going to be absolutely insufferable, and that is the thing I'm dreading most about this, this season. Because I could absolutely see that happening.
Sure.
And I would agree that it doesn't deserve to win. I think The Wild Robot, or even if Memoir of a Snail was a film that was winning a lot, I would be perfectly content with that.
Mm-hmm.
Or Flow. I haven't seen Flow yet, so
yeah, maybe that's another good one.
Throw that into the mix.
Yeah.
But if Inside Out 2 sweeps though, and it just wins everything, it is going to be a nightmare for me, because everyone is going to completely shit on the film because of the whole sports part of it.
Yeah.
Even though I do think it is a film that deserves to be in a 5. I think, the way it enhances the complications with its new characters, I think is really good. Really, really good.
Gotcha.
So, anyway, that is my re-review of Inside Out 2.
I was gonna say, we talked about that one more than I expected.
Yeah. At any rate, all of that to say, animation has been great this year.
It's been very good.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Someone find Adam Elliot. Give him a hug. Hug that man.
Oh, bugger.